Some children inherit money. Others inherit financial fear. Fear compounds too. And here's what almost no one says out loud. Both happen long before any money changes hands. Before a child understands what a bank account is, they've already absorbed a complete emotional rulebook about money. What it means, whether it's safe, whether people like them are allowed to have it, whether it will eventually run out.
One child watches their parents panic every time the phone rings. It might be another bill collector. Another child watches their parents sit calmly at dinner, discussing whether to add a second property to the portfolio. Neither child understands finance yet, but both are already learning how money feels.
That emotional education, invisible, unintentional, and deeply formative, shapes more financial outcomes than any school lesson ever will. Some people inherit assets. Others inherit hesitation. The hesitation is often the more expensive inheritance. These are 17 lessons rich parents teach their kids. Almost none of them are spoken out loud.
What children learn before school? There's a classroom that runs before kindergarten, before any formal lesson, before a child has a single opinion about money. It runs through atmosphere, through the tension in a parent's voice, through what gets celebrated and what gets feared. Children inherit emotional economics before they inherit anything else.
Lesson 1. Money is a tool, not a trophy. Wealthy families rarely teach children to worship money. They teach them to use it. The question is never, how do I get rich? It's, what am I building? What problem am I solving? What does a life without financial pressure actually look like? Money becomes the instrument, never the destination. In environments where wealth is the goal itself, the trophy, the result is a lifetime of chasing without arriving. The number gets bigger, the feeling of enough never comes. Lesson 2. Scarcity is a mindset, not just a reality. Two families, similar incomes, completely opposite relationships with money. One treats every dollar as something fragile, something that might disappear. The other treats money as renewable, something that can be earned again, grown again, rebuilt. Many people spend their entire adult lives protecting themselves financially, without ever realizing they were trained to fear expansion. That's not weakness, it's conditioning, installed quietly across years of observation, and it runs deep enough that most people never trace it back to where it started. Lesson 3. Assets before consumption. Two teenagers receive their first paychecks on the same day. One buys sneakers, the expensive ones, the ones everyone's wearing. The other buys shares of a company they use every single day. 10 years later, their financial lives barely resemble each other. Not because of talent, not because of luck, because of the template behind that first decision. Buy things that make money. Avoid things that drain it. That's the whole framework. Most people hear it once. Wealthy children live inside it.
In wealthy households, stocks, real estate, and ownership stakes are dinner conversation. They're normal, expected, part of what adults do. In households where these concepts never appear, where investing sounds like something reserved for other people, children grow up with a different map. Not dumber, not lazier, just working from a completely different blueprint of what's available.
How wealth actually works as a system. Most people understand money at the surface level. Earn it, spend it, save what's left. Wealthy families understand money as a system, with mechanics, with leverage, with emotional patterns that either accelerate or quietly destroy every financial decision a person makes. Hesitation,
is expensive. Lesson 4. Debt has two faces. Most people inherit one story about debt. Avoid it. It's dangerous. It means you failed. Wealthy families teach something more precise. The wealthy don't fear debt. They fear the wrong kind of debt. Good debt acquires assets that grow. Bad debt funds consumption that disappears. A loan that buys a cash-flowing property is categorically different from a credit card used to perform wealth for other people. One builds quietly, the other drains quietly. But to someone who was only taught that debt is dangerous, both feel identical, both get avoided, and the leverage that could have changed the trajectory never gets used.
Lesson 5. Compounding is a philosophy, not just a formula. Here's the real reason most people never build wealth through investing, even when they understand how it works. Most people understand compounding mathematically. Very few are emotionally structured to tolerate it. Compounding is slow. It's invisible for years. It requires doing nothing when every instinct says do something. It asks you to trust a future you can't see with money you can feel right now.
For someone raised in financial anxiety, that ask is enormous. The money sitting in an investment account feels like money that could be used, that could solve something, that could reduce the constant low-level hum of financial stress. Wealthy children are raised to feel something different about that money. It's not idle, it's working. Patience isn't sacrifice, it's strategy. A child who watched their parents invest consistently carries a lived emotional reference point into adulthood. Investing is what adults do. It's familiar. It's expected. The account growing slowly in the background isn't unsettling. It's proof the system is working. A child who never saw that account, investing feels like another world. Not because of intelligence, because of emotional distance alone. Rich Explained isn't about motivation. It's about understanding the mechanisms most people were never shown. Compounding is one of them. Not the math, but the emotional architecture required to let it actually work. Lesson 6. The emotional cost of short-term thinking. Financial anxiety forces short-term thinking. When survival feels urgent, tomorrow matters less than today. The question becomes, what do I need right now? What fixes the pressure this week? That's not irrationality. That's a completely reasonable response to a real condition. But its cost is enormous and invisible. Comfort has a cost, and it's usually paid in decades. Every decision pulled toward immediate relief is a decision pulled away from compounding, away from long-term positioning, away from the quiet, unremarkable wealth building that happens in the background of people who can afford to be patient. Wealthy families teach children to extend their time horizon, not as discipline, but as emotional identity. Long-term thinkers don't resist short-term temptation through willpower. They just don't experience it the same way. But money itself was never the deepest advantage.
Rooms, language, and who you become.
This is the part most financial content skips entirely. The financial advantages of wealthy families aren't only found in balance sheets. They're found in rooms, in conversations, in the specific confidence that comes from spending your entire childhood surrounded by people who treated success as proximity, not as something to admire from a distance. Many people think rich children become confident because they grow up wealthy. In reality, many become wealthy because they grew up confident.
The causality runs in both directions, but the emotional direction almost always comes first. Environment scales behavior.
Lesson 7. Your network
is an asset class. Wealthy parents don't just tell children to make good connections. They engineer environments where certain kinds of people are simply normal. By the time a wealthy child enters professional life, they carry a network that took decades to build. And they didn't consciously build it. It was built around them, through clubs and dinners and schools and rooms where decisions get made. The result isn't just who they know, it's how they walk into a room. The rooms don't feel intimidating, they feel familiar. The language spoken inside them is a language they already speak fluently.
Lesson 8. Wealthy children normalize wealthy people. This is one of the most underestimated mechanisms in generational wealth. When a child grows up around successful people, not celebrities, not abstractions, but real adults who own businesses and navigate complex decisions, something quiet happens. Success stops feeling like an exception. It starts feeling like the expected trajectory.
One teenager thinks, people like me don't usually end up running companies. Another thinks, 3 people I know personally run companies. That's just what some people do. The second teenager isn't more talented. They're just operating from a different map of what's normal. That map shapes every decision they make. What to pursue, what to risk, what to believe is available to someone like them.
Lesson 9. Language patterns open or close doors. Social fluency is a skill, and like every skill, it develops fastest in environments where it's constantly modeled. The ability to hold a conversation in a room full of decision makers and not shrink, to ask questions without apologizing for them, to disagree without escalating, to communicate confidence without performing it. Wealthy children develop this fluency without thinking about it. It was always expected, always present, never a gap that needed to be closed. The right conversation in the right room has changed more financial trajectories than most resumes ever will.
Lesson 10. Confidence around money is taught, not inherited. In wealthy households, money conversations happen at the table. Numbers are discussed openly. Decisions are explained calmly. Children watch adults navigate financial complexity without panic. That exposure creates something specific: comfort. Not expertise, comfort. The child who grew up watching calm, rational money conversations will enter adulthood with a fundamentally different response to financial decisions. Not smarter, just calmer.
In financial behavior, calm is a competitive advantage. That's exactly the kind of invisible structural advantage Rich explained exists to name, because most people aren't aware it's operating until they're already inside it. How wealth is felt before it's built. Most people don't fail financially because they lack information. They fail because their emotional patterns conflict with wealth-building behavior, and those patterns were installed before they were old enough to question them.
But here's something almost no one in financial content will say. Some wealthy families accidentally create financially fragile children too. When money is always present and never explained, when children are shielded from consequence, never allowed to fail, never taught what things actually cost, the wealth doesn't transfer. Only the spending does. Generational wealth doesn't survive on money alone. It survives on the psychological framework built around it. Without that framework, even large fortunes tend to dissipate within a generation or two. The research on this is remarkably consistent. Rich Explained isn't about wealth worship. It's about understanding the systems, including the ones that fail, even from the inside.
If any part of this is starting to feel uncomfortably familiar, say so in the comments. Most financial behavior starts earlier than people realize. That conversation matters. Lesson 11. Money was never just money. This is the layer most financial content never touches. For most people, money was never just money. It was approval, safety, conflict, status, love. The way some households argued about it, the way others went silent around it. Money carried all of that weight, long before it carried any actual value. Children who grew up in households where money was connected to anxiety often spend their adult lives making financial decisions that are secretly about something else entirely. Spending to feel safe, saving to feel in control, giving to feel worthy, avoiding money conversations to avoid conflict. The dollar amount changes. The emotional pattern underneath it doesn't, until it's made visible. Wealthy families tend to create a cleaner relationship with money. Not perfect, but more emotionally neutral. Money is a system. It operates according to logic. It can be understood, directed, and built over time. That emotional neutrality, the ability to make financial decisions without the weight of old associations, may be the most underrated advantage in this entire list. Lesson 12. Failure is tuition. In wealthy environments, failure is expensive, but expected. A child who starts something and loses money isn't seen as reckless. They're seen as someone accumulating data. The loss gets reframed. What did we learn? What would we do differently? In many average environments, the same scenario carries a completely different emotional weight. Risk is risky. Failure is evidence you should have been more careful. Shame teaches one thing consistently: avoidance. Over decades, one group makes more attempts, gets more feedback, builds genuine tolerance for uncertainty. The other group plays it safe and gradually stops being able to explain why their outcomes feel predetermined. Lesson 13. Delayed gratification is evidence-based. Children who wait for the reward aren't simply more disciplined. They trust the future. And that trust comes from environments where waiting was consistently honored. Children who take the immediate option, many of them learned, reasonably from experience, that waiting often means losing, that the promise rarely holds. Delayed gratification is easier when your environment has already proven that the future is worth investing in. Wealthy families engineer that evidence deliberately. It's not a character difference. It's an environmental design difference. Lesson 14. Identity shapes spending. Two people receive the same bonus. One upgrades their watch immediately. The other quietly transfers the money into an index fund. From the outside, you'd never know the second person received anything. That's not restraint. That's identity. Many people don't buy luxury because they love luxury. They buy it because they're trying to escape the feeling of being invisible. Status spending is identity spending. It's the attempt to perform a version of success that feels like it belongs to someone else, to signal arrival, to prove something, often to people who aren't watching. Old money culture understands this intuitively. The loudest display of wealth is almost always the sign of the newest relationship with it. Generational wealth doesn't need to perform. It's already secure in what it is. Lesson 15. Long-term thinking is a structural advantage. Wealthy families play long games, not because they're born more patient, because financial security makes long-term thinking emotionally possible. When survival feels urgent, the time horizon shrinks automatically. Every decision gets filtered through, what do I need right now? When security is emotionally internalized, when the future doesn't feel like a threat, the question shifts. What does this position me for in 10 years? The rich don't just make better financial decisions. They make them from a completely different time orientation. That orientation was inherited before they earned their first dollar. Lesson 16. Work to learn before you work to earn. One young person takes the highest paying entry-level job available. Another takes a lower paying role inside a company they want to understand from the inside. 5 years later, one has a comfortable salary. The other has a blueprint. And blueprints scale. Salaries have a ceiling. Many wealthy families push children toward exposure over income, deliberately. The belief, understanding how systems work from the inside, compounds in ways a paycheck simply cannot. Lesson 17. Self-education is an identity, not a habit. Wealthy families don't treat formal education as the completion of learning. They treat it as the beginning. The skills they consider essential, how taxes actually work at scale, how to read a balance sheet, how to negotiate, how to evaluate risk, are almost never taught in schools. They live in rooms, in conversations, in mentorships that run quietly alongside the formal system. The wealthiest environments build a culture of perpetual curiosity, not as motivation, but as identity. Learning isn't something you do to get somewhere. It's something you do because this is who people like us are. That identity, installed early, reinforced constantly, is perhaps the most durable advantage in this entire list. What this actually means. Here's the full picture, stated plainly. Wealthy children don't just inherit assets, they inherit frameworks, emotional templates, time horizons, identities, relationships with failure, risk, patience, and money itself. None of that is taught in a classroom. Most of it is never spoken directly. It's absorbed through proximity, through what's normal in the room you grow up in, through what the adults around you feared and what they didn't. Many wealthy people are not calmer around money because they are richer. They're richer because they were taught to stay calm around money. The emotional pattern came first. The financial outcome followed. Now, here's what this means for everyone who didn't grow up in that environment. The beliefs you inherited are not permanent. But most people never realize they inherited them in the first place. That's the real gap. Not income, not access, not information. The emotional programming running quietly beneath every financial decision you've ever made, and everyone you've avoided making. Awareness doesn't automatically change behavior, but it does something critical. It makes behavior visible. And what's visible can be examined, questioned, and deliberately rebuilt. Wealth is not just money. It's conditioning. And conditioning, unlike inheritance, can be rewritten. Because once you understand that wealth is partly behavioural, that it lives in patterns more than paychecks, you stop looking at money the same way.
And that shift in perspective, that's exactly what Rich Explained is here for. If you value this kind of thinking, subscribe. There's more where this came from.